and welcome to Wrestling and Everything, Coast to Coast, with your hosts, Buddy Sotello, Esquire, and Evan Ginzburg. And as we go around the room, Evan, why don't you introduce our second guest?
That's right. We're having a boy band reunion here tonight. Yeah, and we have Dr. Mike Lano, legendary photographer and journalist for the wrestling community. And Dr. Mike, please introduce our distinguished author.
And well, Ev, you and I did radio for about 1 billion years every week. We lost Tracy Smothers Wednesday, and one of the nicest, absolute nicest people, giving people back to the business. He'd been battling various illnesses and cancer for quite some time. John Cosper, of course, author, publisher, a zillion books. Well, Tracy Smothers, Don't Buy This Book, and Everybody Dies, The Ballad of Cousin Elvira on great female legend Elvira Snodgrass, the original Black Panther. This is hooker shooter stuff. The Life and Times of Jim Mitchell, Bluegrass Brawlers, Wrestling in Louisville, Kentucky. I guess we're right where he lives and knows best. Grappling by Gaslight, many others. Obviously, I think he was a co-founder of COVIDCon. We just did the Cauliflower Alley CollyCon event. And John, when I was thinking of Tracy, I emailed you because I was thinking about him, and then I turn on Busted Open radio, and I heard that Tracy had passed. Just hours after I'd emailed you, how is Tracy doing? I felt so awful and idiotic for not knowing that. But tell us about this book. So you and Tracy worked with this book, but how long had Tracy been ailing and fighting this? Because we thought he had, maybe won this battle, only to be hit by more or recurrences. What was?
Unfortunately, it was cancer came back for a rematch. Is kind of what happened. He was diagnosed. It was last August or September, and he had six rounds of chemo over the course of about 7-8 months. In between that, was hospitalized about 4 times. They were hitting him with really, really intensive chemo to fight the cancer, which they were able to get rid of and everything. They went ahead and left a port in for years as precautionary measure and everything. He was doing all right. COVID happened and the whole world got shut down, it forced him to stay home. Tracy wanted to be on the road, wanted to be traveling and stuff and everything. And the best thing for his health was for him to be home and recuperating. He's got a good support system where he lived and everything. And unfortunately, it said the cancer, it was kind of a triple whammy. The cancer came back. He had a hernia that needed an operation, which he had an operation on about 2 weeks ago. Actually, almost lost him after that surgery, from what I understand. The thing that really complicated things was the intensive chemo had really damaged his heart, and he was hospitalized a couple of times with heart issues over the last couple of weeks, and just his heart rate was way up, his blood pressure was way up. So the plan was to go in with less aggressive chemo the second time around, but it was prognosis was not looking good any way you look at it, from what I understand. And he was telling us all one thing, but we all kind of got the feeling he wasn't telling us everything. Mike, he went down swinging. I mean, there's no other way to say it. He was fighting. He was like, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to lick this. And it was 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning when Madman Pondo called me and let me know. He said, we lost Tracy this morning. And next thing he told me was, it's not out, officially yet. They haven't notified all the family and everything. I found out 2 hours ago. And I immediately, one of Tracy's famous lines is, tell a friend, tell a phone, tell a wrestler, So immediately it's like, he would have appreciated that it was going around. But I got to tell you, when you get to work with somebody, on a book like this, you get to know them really well. I've got good friendships with Dr. D. David Schultz, with Madman Pondo, with Kenny Bolin, with all the guys I've worked with. I've gotten to know Johnny Candido really well, working on Chris Candido's biography, and I'm just starting in with Princess Victoria as well right now. Mm-hmm. But Tracy and I got to know each other real well. We spent a lot of time on the phone over the last year. There were nights when he was at home, he could barely talk. There was one night we hung up after 5 minutes. He went out the parking lot, collapsed, and his girlfriend called the ER and had to rush him in. And there were nights when he was hooked up doing chemo and whatever drugs they had him on, he was just wired. And he would go, sitting, doing chemotherapy treatment and just talk for 2 hours and just talk your ear off and tell you stories you just wouldn't believe. And, but, we got to be good friends, and, we would text and chat every now and then. He called me every now and then, sometimes just to talk about football or to gripe about politics or whatever and stuff. And, just see how you were doing. And really that's how Tracy was with everybody, and, the outpouring on social media, anytime there's a wrestler that passes away, you see it, from the fans, from the wrestling media, and from the other wrestlers and tributes. And, Tracy, to me, it felt like I was kind of like, well, I know Tracy better, so it's hitting harder. And it certainly seems to be more, but, it was the boys, the guys that he'd worked with, back in the day. It was the media, it was the fans, and it was all these indie wrestlers, all the guys and all the ladies that he's poured himself into for 20, 30 years, in locker rooms and gymnasiums and warehouses and wherever else he's worked for, everybody from AIW to IWA Mid-South and all the other places he's been. And there's, dozens and dozens of men and women that called him Pops. He was their wrestling dad. Mickey Knuckles said he's the only real father figure I ever knew. And my goodness, Jessie Belle. A lot of people still believe Jessie Belle is his actual daughter. She's not, but that's how he broke her into the business and got around. So
I impressed her on that, and
yeah.
she's, she.
And I'm not blowing. We did reveal it in the book, so I'm not blowing her kayfabe here. But she's his daughter for all intents and purposes. And she actually she was at a show I was at the same day he had hernia surgery and had to leave because she'd gotten word he was on a ventilator after he got out of surgery. And like I said, we almost lost him 2 weeks ago. So
well, you bring up an interesting point. The internet marks out there, and Mike and Evan also share the same sort of disdain for these folks, which is that a lot of them would say, well, Tracy Smothers, what kind of belts did he ever have? He was never world champion. He was never on TV. I don't remember him headlining WrestleMania or
these smarks or whatever you want to call them. They're trying to learn. They deserve to learn about him, because just take one of the many promotions. Take away the NWA, WCW, Smoking Pistols, Wild-Eyed Southern Boys thing. With Armstrong's son, talented son. All of his kids were great. But you look at the championship push he had from Jim Cornette and Smoky Mountain. That was enough. Not even bringing up the FBI angle, which was one of the funniest, greatest things. He and Tommy Rich had a blast with that. And I was thinking...
Nashville, Italy.
Yeah, John... full-blooded times. But John, you might know this from Continental, that was where that whole collective kind of met. Tracy and Tommy Rich and Eddie Gilbert. What I was told is Eddie Gilbert introduced Heyman when he came in for that to Tracy and Tommy Rich. And even though Paul pushed out Eddie Gilbert, after a couple of years of the ECW with Todd Gordon, he later brought in these two other guys that Eddie had apparently introduced him to. And with Little Guido, the three of them, just magic stuff. So I think internet people should know their history, because everybody bellyaches that history's rewritten by Stamford. And, there he was, even there in that company as Freddie Joe Floyd, utilizing portions of Jack and Jerry Briscoe's names for the character that he was at there, that I'm sure Jimmy Cornette brought him in, during that 90s period. So
he was one of the guys that came over from Smoky Mountain for a time and basically worked as jobbers, and he worked as a trainer for him for a little bit too. And we covered a lot of that in the book. I've seen nothing but positive. I haven't seen who is this guy or what did he want, because especially the indie wrestlers and the indie fans of today, they know who Tracy is. They know darn well who Tracy is, and these guys. I could name you 24 of them right now that consider him, like I said, a father figure. And he was one of my early impressions when I first got to know who he was he was working for an indie fed here in New Albany, Indiana. He was the champion. He was the top heel. And every night he came out, worked his mate. He was past his prime physically, but he would come out, literally he'd be out for 25 minutes. he'd be stalling, or he'd be cutting promos, or he'd be doing his dance contest for 23 of those minutes, wrestle for 2 of them, and you're entertained the entire time he was out there. And the whole time he's focused on, even if he's going over, he's focused on putting this other kid over, and he'll get the Tracy sucks chant going. And then next thing you know, all right, y'all can say Tracy sucks, but if anybody here starts chanting and going, go Mitch, go, everybody dies. And then everybody's cheering the new kid. They're cheering this kid on. But the thing I remember, second or third show I went to, somebody goes through the curtain in one of the early matches a little too fast, and they push the curtain back. There's Tracy sitting in a chair. And Tracy watched every match on the show. He knew every one of those kids. Yeah, and every month it was, Rick Brady was bringing in the same kids. So he got to know them real well. And month after month, he would watch their matches, and they would sit down with him, and he was always positive. He was always encouraging. He's like, if you tried this, if you did this a little differently, and teach them that old school psychology, teaching them how to work smart, teaching them how to play off the crowd. And I mean, it was just the impact. I've said a couple of times this week, the legacy that he's leaving behind. Yeah, I don't know that we can fully measure it, because I mean, if you see it on social media this week, I mean, I had no idea that he had taken Edge and Christian under his wing. He didn't even talk about that, but he, loaded the 2 of them up in his car when they had $1.50 between the 2 of them, and took them out on the road and poured himself into them. And, CM Punk and Colt Cabana and Chris Hero. And I mean, Chris Candido is another one. I mean, he was just constantly putting people over and looking for, those young guys who were hungry and wanted it, were willing to listen, were willing to learn. And, one of the things when we worked on the book was every week we would talk for an hour and a half on the phone, and we'd be lucky if we covered a year. We started off in 1983. The next week we did 1984, 1985. He gets about 1992. That's when he got his first real bad concussion. We did 1992, and then the next week we covered 93 to 96. The week after that, we're doing 97 to 2000. So it's a little bit foggier in his mind, but he never forgot these kids. Anybody he met, or ran into. There's one guy, he calls himself Mr. Brickster, has kind of a Lego gimmick. But he met him at a show, and Brickster came to him and said, hey, tell me what you thought of my match. And he gave him feedback, suggested this and that, and kept up with him. And not just at the shows, and he would talk to him, but Brickster got hurt at one point, had to stay home, and Tracy was sending him messages, hey buddy, keep in shape, keep eating right, you're going to get back at it, you're going to get back out there. And I mean, really built him up, really encouraged him while he was really down and really struggling at one time.
John, let me just say, as a fan, I saw him live many times, WCW, ECW, less so WWE, because I don't particularly like their product. But I would put him on a very short list of guys I could say in 46 years of attending, I never saw him in a bad match live. Never. The guy was consistently good, very good, or excellent. Each and every time, gave 110%. You could see he loved it. He was having fun out there. And to be on a short list of the most consistent wrestlers of all time, that's where I would put him. And again, you don't have to be a world champion to be a great wrestler and a great entertainer. And that's how I think of Tracy.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with that. So last time I saw him work, it was in Somerset, Kentucky. It was last September. We're in this gymnasium with no air conditioning. It's boiling hot in there. He was in a main event. It was a 4-on-4 in a steel cage, and he's the leader of the babyface team. He leads them to victory. Everybody's all excited. Hurricane J.J. McGuire's at ringside managing, and all of a sudden...
That's my buddy. I love that guy.
Friend of the show.
All of a sudden, end of the match, he turns around and he attacks the other leader of the babyfaces, and he levels them all with the 2x4. And I swear to you, some guy in the front row starts screaming, "He's just double-crossed him!" I mean, kayfabe is dead. I probably just woke my entire family up. Yeah. Kayfabe is dead, but right there in that boiling hot gymnasium, he made people believe. And I've seen a few indie guys that can do that as well. There was a guy, Teddy King, who's retired now, but I mean, he could get people just absolute white hot in that heat. And Teddy's another one of those guys. He learned from Tracy. Tracy, he watched Tracy growing up, and he was mentored by Tracy. But I mean, in that one moment, Tracy just lit him up, and everybody was just like, can't believe Tracy would come in here and do that in our building. And he can make them believe.
What did Tracy feel where it was his greatest match?
I don't know if he would point to a greatest match. If you asked him his favorite opponent of all time, he wouldn't hesitate. He'd say Candido. And he'd tell you all the great matches the two of them had. They were doing the ladder matches in Smoky Mountain the same time that Michaels and Razor were getting ready to do theirs in WWF. And I've gotten working on Candido's book, got to know a little bit more about those matches. Basically, obviously they didn't have the climb up either side ladder like the WWF uses. They had one that they got from Home Depot that every night they were having to jerry rig it and duct tape it and put a broom handle inside of it to keep it sturdy. I think by the last night they had somebody in the ring actually holding it up. But I mean, he would point to that and he would say that was just his favorite guy to be in the ring with, just somebody else who absolutely loved wrestling and was always great to work with.
Very quick, let me just throw this stuff out on him because I saw these two things at ECW and later XPW, which was a Rob Black's knockoff of ECW in LA, where I was the photographer there and had ridden and used to pick him up at the airport and stuff. He was what we called a quiet locker room leader, way before the fans were ever let into any venue. And Bully Ray, Bubba Ray Dudley talked about this in ECW, and I saw it as well. Tracy would get like all of the talent, all the guys and girls, and take them into the ring, middle of the ring, and roll around with them, show them holds, tell old stories. And he did the same in ECW and in promotions, probably, the two of the largest ones he worked with towards the end of his career, even though he obviously worked well beyond that. When riots occurred, one in ECW that was really famous, and then even in XPW with the fans, later on when the show was happening, but particularly this ECW one, which was '97. He heard about the riot and he was in the shower all sudsed out, and Johnny probably this, and he ran out. All he had was a towel around him, so he was butt naked but with a towel around him, and he went out there and was swinging, like you said at the very beginning when we brought you aboard. He would never go down without swinging. Well, he was not going to go down without swinging, and he swinged all these fans, butt naked, wet, no shoes, nothing out there to help stop the riot and quell it. And that was what a lot of people said about him, was he was so respected, a quiet locker room leader. Russ was asking, Buddy was asking about the best match, I guess probably from either a fan or a photographer shooting at a ringside, it would be his team match, Smoking Guns against Midnight Express. I would say a big level match, not talking about his Smoky Mountain or any of his other great accomplishments or Continental stuff, etc. But would you agree with that? Maybe he didn't think of that as, but I think the critics think that was.
I think he definitely agreed that was one of his better matches, and he talked endlessly about how much he loved working with Steve and getting to work with the Midnights, and it's the combination of the two guys in the ring, plus he had Jim Cornette at ringside, and just had a lot of joy and a lot of love for those guys, and so certainly he was very, very proud of that run and those matches as well.
When I went on your sites, johncosper.com, particularly eatsleepwrestle.com, I saw a photo of him with a belt on that Jim Cornette took, and it must have been in NWA WCW. So tell us a little about the rapport. Obviously, Jim had all the respect and love in the world for Tracy, but talk about that dynamic or the relationship they had.
Well, Jim brought him in as kind of, he wanted a veteran presence because he was going to be working with a lot of younger guys. And he'd also brought in, guys like Ricky Morton as well to kind of fill that role. But he was the one who kind of put Tracy in the main event single spot. And, he was the one who, taught him really kind of how to do the promos and how to present himself as a main event guy, and present himself as the top babyface. And, he saw something in Tracy that Tracy had, not that he necessarily, didn't think was there, but nobody else had ever invested that in him. And that's why he became one of the top guys in Smoky Mountain.
And promo-wise, and then I'll shut up and let the other guys chime in. What a year. I mean, he must have learned so much from Bob Armstrong, but what a year. And then to lose Bob Armstrong and Tracy now, just a horrific 2020.
Absolutely. Yep.
John, I was just thinking, Dr. Mike and myself did radio together for, I would say, 7 or 8 years, right, Mike? Weekly.
Yeah.
And one of our favorite guests was a blues player, Mighty Sam McLean. And one night he came on, and one of his band members had just passed. And he was just pouring his heart out, how much he missed the guy and how tough it was on the road and how the music industry had tightened up, and you bonded with the guy. And when he finally died, I mean, we had him on several times. It really hit me. And so I'm thinking, as Tracy's biographer, spending all those hours on the phone, somebody's pouring their heart out to you, telling you his life story, his joy, his pain, his disappointments. It must have really hit you hard. I would assume that it
did. Like I said, you get to know these people not just as a subject, but they become your friends. I've got good relationships with everybody I've worked with, and I mean, yeah, I'll tell you, 2 guys that I've met that have the biggest heart in this business, and have done the most for people without asking anything in return. One's Madman Pondo, and one is Tracy Smothers. I mean, both of those guys, I mean, they have done so much, taken so many people under their wings and mentored and, big brothered or fathered, so many different wrestlers. And, I mean, Tracy still barely knew me. And, we were appearing at shows and stuff. And, when the young guys would come over and talk to him, he'd be like, hey, you need to meet this guy over here. His name's John Cosper. He's got a website called Eat, Sleep, Wrestle. He writes about wrestling. You need to get to know this guy. Like I said, we kind of, been at similar shows and hadn't actually met until about 2 years ago, and got to know each other. And immediately he's turned around, he's put me over the same as he does any other wrestlers. And, I mean, he never forgot a fan, never forgot anybody he worked with in the ring or shared a locker room with. And, it was, Wednesday was a hard day. It's like, you get that news and, I'm watching, so I wasn't certainly going to be the one to break it. I was going to wait till family or friends or somebody closer broke it, but just waiting because I'm sitting there, it's like I need to talk to somebody about this, and didn't know who to do it. Called my wife, talked to her, and then finally the tributes started popping up, and you're able to put your own feelings into down and everything, and all the while trying to care about your day job, which is it was a rough day. I'll say that.
John, can you tell me how it all got started for you, where your love for wrestling came from, and then how it evolved to turning into, you becoming an author and everything else that you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. I got into it. I mean, I was an 80s kid, and it was really the rock and wrestling era that
Cowabunga, dude.
Yeah. It was the rock and wrestling era. I mean, I was an A-Team fan. I was a fan of Mr. T. And I was a fan of Cyndi Lauper. And every night, my parents would watch the news, then Entertainment Tonight would come on. And I remember all of a sudden seeing, there's Cyndi Lauper and Mr. T with these wrestlers. And I'm hearing my friends at school talk, too, about, Worldwide Wrestling Federation and everything. And it was when Vince was starting his big takeover. So, and my grandfather was a big wrestling man. My dad's dad, watched Florida Championship Wrestling. And my uncle to this day loves to talk about watching Dusty Rhodes and all of those guys, when he was still in the house. And it wasn't allowed in our house because my mother knew I would turn around and wrestle with my siblings. And of course I did. But I remember I finally convinced him to let me watch Superstars one Saturday morning. And the first wrestler out is Randy Savage, and pomp and circumstance starts. And here he comes down. He's got the hat, he's got the sequin robe, and he's got Miss Elizabeth. Before he even gets to the ring, I'm hooked. I'm sold on this thing. And my dad's going, "This is the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen." And I'm like, "Oh, this is awesome. What are you talking about?" So that's
to Elvira Snodgrass, Jim Mitchell. Some of these are some of the most important figures that few people talk about. And so you've really become quite the historian, from fan of that stuff, the show busy stuff, to the nuts and bolts, the real wrestling.
Oh, certainly, yeah. It's been a long journey. Like I said, I got into that, and oddly enough, I lived in Houston, Texas for a little while, then moved up here to the Louisville area. Never went to Louisville Gardens. Never watched the Memphis wrestling on TV, which I'm like, why didn't I watch that back when I could? But every afternoon, I was watching reruns of World Class Championship Wrestling, the Von Erichs and the Freebirds, and that's what really, really got me. But I was kind of in and out of it for a long time. As a young adult, at one point in my early 20s, I had a friend of mine moved in with him for about 9 months who was a wrestling fan as well. He brought his entire wrestling video library and his entire book library. So that was when I read Mick Foley's Have a Nice Day. I read Lawler's book. I read Heenan's book. I read Foley is Good, and 3 or 4 others in that brief time, and kind of stayed with it after that. Kind of watching off and on. Got married, and still was kind of watching it on the side. My wife is not a fan. Has never been a fan. Went to a WrestleMania, and what happened was, I was looking for a new challenge. I've been writing professionally for 20-something years. I started writing skits for my church youth group and did drama ministry for a long time. I did film. I've written fiction books. I've got some sci-fi and some short story collections that are out there on my regular author site, and a number of short films. But I was looking for something different. I had worked at a school for a couple of years as a high school theater director. Tried to get a full-time teaching job and just didn't know the right people and wasn't able to break into that, and was just looking for something new, something that challenged me. And I was aware that there were books out about different territories, and Mark James's stuff on the Memphis territory, and I knew the history of it's like, well, Louisville's got a history as the number 2 town in Memphis, and Mark's had never done a book about Louisville. Plus, you got the OVW, and then I started Googling about it and reading some of Tim Hornbaker's stuff and Steve Yoe's stuff. They had done a lot of research and read the story about Strangler Lewis getting his name in Louisville, Kentucky back in 1913. And so it would have been in November 2012, I think. My wife picks me up. We go to lunch at Penn Station. And while we're sitting there talking, I'm just like, I'm thinking about writing a book. It's like, I'm thinking about writing a book about the history of wrestling in Louisville. And she said, go for it. I just didn't even think about it. It's like, really? She's like, honey, you love this crap. It's like, there's a built-in audience for books about wrestling. There's a built-in audience for books about Louisville. Give it a shot. What have you got to lose? So now these days, she's like, hey, can you talk about anything about relating it back to wrestling? So I don't know. She totally is thrilled with that decision. But, she's certainly proud of me, and the kids are proud of me. And, I spent a year and a half writing Bluegrass Brawlers and telling the story of Louisville, Kentucky from 1880 all the way up till present day in 2014 when the book came out. And that was when I discovered the names, Black Panther Jim Mitchell. That was one that jumped out at me because, he was a Louisville native and he was African-American, and was a story I really wanted to go back and tell. And I remember actually being at the public library downtown with Jim Cornette one day, and coming across the Elvira Snodgrass name, and Jim just getting a huge kick out of this gimmicky character that she was and everything. And that was another one that stuck out at me. So that was, the seeds of those books were planted way, way back with the first one that I wrote. And after a couple of years, I went back and did a more in-depth dive on Louisville as well. There was a promotion called the Allen Athletic Club. They ran from 1935 to 1957, and they were packing out the Columbia Gym just a couple blocks up the street from Louisville Gardens every Tuesday night for 22 years. And that was the era of Luthez and Gorgeous George, and Mildred Burke. There were multiple nights where they were wrestling bears. There were multiple nights when they were wrestling alligators. Actually, Louisville back in 1909 there was a guy who supposedly was a Zulu prince who came into town on a New Year's Day, wrestled a bull. Which didn't turn out well. It didn't turn out well for it. Nobody died, but certainly was a disappointment.
Tracy wrestled Ginger the Bear. I'm familiar with Victor the wrestling bear in the 60s and 70s, but Tracy had a more up-to-date bear.
Yeah, he wrestled. There were multiple Gingers over the years too, but he did wrestle a Ginger. He wrestled 3 different bears in his career. The last time he wrestled the same bear 3 nights in a row, while also working a tag match and a singles match each one of those nights. Yeah. That the first night he's doing it too. This is one of his favorite stories to tell. Was
how he wished for pay-per-view.
Yeah, but he had the local news showed up because they knew he was wrestling a bear, and as this woman puts a microphone in his face. It's like, how can you go out there with this bear? This is cruelty to animals and the way they're treating the bear. It's like, lady, other one's got to go out there with a bear. That bear's twice. What are you worried about the bear for? Why aren't you worried about me? And he'd already seen what bears could do. The first time he wrestled a bear, his buddies kind of roped him into it. And this particular bear, the first guy to step in with the bear was a football player from, I don't remember which college in Tennessee, but a big lineman, 300-pound lineman, and made the mistake of provoking the bear in a way that the trainer had told him, don't try to do this to the bear. And that bear absolutely messed this guy up. And Tracy's just like, oh, hell no. And he's trying to head for the hills and get out of there. Like, no, buddy. No. We signed you up. You're wrestling the bear. So
33 shows, and this is our first bear wrestling reference. So,
oh my goodness.
It takes an interview with someone from Kentucky to bring up the bear wrestling.
Superstar Graham at the Cow Palace wrestled Victor the Bear in 1971, 70 or 71.
Oh my gosh! Well,
so a lot of the guys were forced to do that. Very quickly, John, behind you, is that a framed Body Donna's photo on your wall?
I do have a Body Donna's poster. Yes, let's see. There we go.
Oh, cool.
And then who is the black and white female wrestler? Is that Elvira behind you, or?
Let's see. Let me unplug here. I'll take you back this way, get you closer. There we go. Yeah. We got Mildred Burke with Jack Pfeffer in one of those. That's a reprint. We've got a Mad Magazine up there. Then we got Princess Victoria and Elvira Snodgrass.
And that poster, is that a New Japan with David Schultz on your left?
It's not New Japan, but it's I don't recall the Japanese promotion. That's 1979.
But that's Dave Schultz on the top, right?
That is Dave Schultz.
Looks like it, yeah.
So if we go a little higher here, we got the Black Panther Jim Mitchell in Arizona in 1955 with Ricky Waldo and Danny McShane. And so this one right here, too. Let's see. We got there we go. Well, I got a glare on it.
Who's the caricature, the drawing, the Ripley's Believe It or Not type caricature?
That is that's Haywood Allen, who was the Louisville promoter from. He ran the promotion from 35 to 47. The artwork was actually done by a guy named Kevin Goodner, who was a local Louisville artist. Actually, just passed away about a year or so ago. Was a big loss for really the artistic community around here. Just a phenomenal artist, and was a mentor to a lot of people around here, including my daughter, which is just a really great guy and. Guy that I always wanted to work with, and I partnered with him when I did the original cover for Louisville's Greatest Show, and that's what he came up with for that. So,
very quickly, I'm starting to fade you guys because it's late. Obviously, it's 3 hours later for Evan, but
I'm not complaining. It's 3 hours later,
man.
Yeah.
John.
It's 10 o'clock. All the good stuff on TV is just starting right now. You can say ass and shit after 10 o'clock tonight, so there's no reason to go to sleep early.
But before I forget on this, I had this written down. Most all of John's many great books. They're all great. There's amazing illustrations as the cover art, like for Elvira's book or Tracy's. Is that all the same artist? Who did all of that? How did you?
No, there are multiple artists that have done different ones. I'm terrible with names. Amanda Rachels, I believe, it was works with John Crowther. John Crowther connected me with her. She's the one who did. I've actually got Elvira sitting right here. So, actually, you guys are first to. I'll give you the story. Elvira's book. One of the interesting stories about her is this legend that her family has about the car accident that ended her career, and where she had rolled her car into a ditch, had gotten her arm pins, between the door and the car, and according to the family, she actually cut her own arm off to get out of the car.
Wow.
Now, there are newspaper stories that seem to contradict that and everything, so I kind of put, well, here's the family's story about it, here's the other story. She did lose the arm one way or another, but the family swears by it, that she cut the arm off to get herself out of the car. She's a very strong, very tough, independent woman, but the story that came up at the 11th hour, and Chris Bergstrom gets the credit for really, getting the first clues on this one. He runs the Fabulous Ladies of Wrestling Facebook page. He messaged me. He's like, what do you know about Betty Nichols? And I quickly did some research and everything, trying to find out what Betty Nichols was. Betty Nichols was the last woman to pin Mildred Burke for the Women's World Championship in 1938. Burke won the title. She lost it to Claire Mortensen and won it back. Then she dropped it to Betty Nichols in Columbus, Ohio, and then won it back three weeks later in Columbus. He sends me a photo of Betty Nichols. Now, Elvira, in her late 1940, got her official start as Edna Yoder. was the name she was using, and then it was late 1941 she reemerged as Elvira Snodgrass, working with Elmer Snodgrass, who was her husband at the time, and really the first woman to kind of take on kind of a gimmicky character persona. She was really the first woman to do that. But Edna Yoder was just, she was the same. She was in the pose, wearing a unitard and everything like that. But the Edna Yoder photos that are out there, it's just this one photo. She's got a certain hairstyle, and she has a Navy anchor on the unitard. Well, Chris sends me this photo he found in the Columbus, Ohio newspaper, which is not available in the newspaper archives. You actually get access to the Columbus, Ohio Public Library, which thanks to Mike Zim, I've had access to. And it's the same photo. It's the Edna Yoder photo. So immediately I was like, all right, we got to stop. We got to go back. We got to see what we can find out, and start diving through every newspaper record we can. And I went back to the Louisville. It actually ended up being Louisville Courier-Journal, 1938, right after Mildred had won the title back from Betty Nichols. Mildred worked Betty Nichols one Tuesday night at the Columbia Gym in Louisville. And there were two photos in the sports section. One of them where Mildred's got the advantage over Betty, and then one where Betty's got the advantage over Mildred. And it's Elvira in that photo. And I was, went into publishing the book when I released the book a couple months ago. I was like, basically 99% sure. I went ahead and said in the book, yes, this is her. Today, I finally got a response back from the University of Notre Dame, where the Jack Pfeffer collection is. All of Jack Pfeffer's files are up there. And I had found out that he had two files up there. There was one labeled Elvira Snodgrass. There was one labeled Edna Yoder / Betty Nichols. And in those files, that Edna Yoder photo is the Rosetta Stone photo of her with the anchor is in there. And then you go to the Elvira one, and it's the same photo. And this is not looking at it in a newspaper that's been sat around for 50 years and then got scanned in on a computer. This is the original photo, and you compare that to the other photos of Elvira that were in that file. Elvira Snodgrass was the last lady to pin Mildred Burke. I mean, it's freaking cool to be able to when you're able to dig up a story like that. There's moments like that. I've had a couple of those. There was the day I got to walk into the house in Toledo, Ohio, where the guy who had bought Jim Mitchell's house as a flip had kept all of his stuff, and to see Jim Mitchell's pipe collection, which is all still up there in Toledo. He's waiting for somebody with the right price. If you know anybody who's interested in smoking pipes and pro wrestling, let me know. We've got to save this collection. But seeing all the pipes and, going through and, first box I open up and I go through, I find the program from the night that Mitchell and Gorgeous George had, incited a riot in Los Angeles. And then I open this envelope and I pull it out. It's a letter to Jim Mitchell from the California Athletic Commission ordering him to answer for his part in inciting the riot at that program, at that event. It's like, these two are mine. I'm setting these aside. So there was another night too. I was probably 2-3 in the morning when I was working on the Louisville's Greatest Show book. And like I said, Haywood Allen he was the name under the Allen Athletic Club in Louisville and had been in Louisville since the early 1900s. He's one of 3 guys that took credit for giving Strangler Lewis his name. But he had sold the promotion out to his partner, Francis McDonough. And when McDonough came down with cancer and passed away in 1957, that was basically the end of the promotion. McDonough's wife, Betty, was also a partner in the business, and she had run the ticket office for years and years. Well, I finally found, it's like 2:00 in the morning, I found Betty McDonough's obituary in the Courier-Journal. And it lists the names of her 2 sons, who were both listed as doctors. So I immediately start Googling. And one of them's retired, and the other one was still a professor at Carnegie Mellon. I sent him an email, and then the next morning, about 9:00, I got a response back. Yes, I am Francis and Betty McDonough's son. I was too young, he was born too young to remember any of that. It's like my brother remembers all of this stuff. So he put me in touch with his brother. His brother sends me just some wonderful photos of his dad, of his mom, pictures of him with Roy Rogers, pictures of him with he told me the greatest story about Gorgeous George had come to dinner one night. And it was Gorgeous George, and there was a reporter from the Louisville Courier-Journal, and his mom and dad and him, and the reporter's wife was there as well. And Gorgeous George starts talking about hypnotism. He was into hypnotism. And the reporter was kind of a skeptic and didn't believe in all this stuff and everything. So George was like, well, let me put you under. So he puts him under and tells him, when you wake up, you won't remember any of this, but your feet will be led and you will not be able to stand up and walk. And so he brings him out and everything like that. And somebody says, let's go in the living room. We'll have some coffee or whatever. And the guy couldn't move, could not get up, couldn't walk away. And he said, remember that particular moment. And then he remembers later on that night, his mom's putting him in the bed to going, son, don't ever mess around with this stuff. Okay, do not mess around with this stuff. I mean, just these moments when you're able to make that kind of a connection with history, and talking to Elvira Snodgrass's niece and nephews, and uncovering the Betty Nichols story, and with Jim Mitchell, the big revelation was realizing that there was no color barrier. Jim Mitchell was the only African American working in the Midwest. He had promoters had no choice. He had to book him against white wrestlers, and he was working white wrestlers from the very beginning and main eventing by 1932. And realizing at least in the North, when he went to the South, he never wrestled a white wrestler in Louisville, Kentucky that I've been able to find. But certainly for him, there was never a color barrier. And one of the stories that I came across said that within the locker room, if you knew how to work and you knew how to wrestle, it didn't matter what color your skin was. If the guys knew you were going to take care of them in the ring, they trusted you. You were one of the boys. And the other side of that was you were all united against a common enemy anyway. You were united against the promoter who was going to try to stiff all of you at the end of the night. So, yeah.
John, what makes a great wrestling biography?
I'm drawn to great storytellers. I like great stories, and I like great storytellers, and I've been very, very fortunate to work with some fantastic ones. Kenny Bolin was one that I'll tell you, Kenny's autobiography is about 60 to 70% true, and the rest of it's all fabricated and made up. But good luck trying to figure out which parts are which. But I mean, just a great storyteller. Dr. D. David Schultz was one of the most consistent storytellers I ever worked with. Anytime, whether it was he had added in print, 20 years before, he was telling it to me over the phone. It was pretty consistent. It was a straight shooter. Tracy obviously was a great storyteller. Bam Bam Pondo was one I went after, because every time I saw Pondo, he had another story. And Pondo's one of those, you listen to his stories and he'll sit there and he'll be like, yeah, so Billy Corrigan invited me and my girlfriend to go to a concert. The Smashing Pumpkins were playing with Marilyn Manson. We had backstage passes, and Marilyn Manson comes out and says, well, let's make a $100 bet. We're going to put Vicks Vapor Rub into our tear ducts. Whichever one of us tears up first is the loser. And he'll sit there and he'll tell you a story like that. He'll be like, there's no way. And then he pulls out the phone. But here's the video on YouTube. And there's Man Pondo sitting next to Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
With Vicks Vapor Rub in their eyes. And there's Billy Corrigan sitting at the table and everything. So, or
just hand over the $100.
Yeah. So, and Marilyn Manson lost. Or he's telling the story about, David Blaine was doing the stunt where he was suspended in a glass box over the Thames River while he was in London promoting one of the backyard wrestling video games. And he was a hunger strike. He wasn't eating anything during that whole time. He was just having water. It's like, I went someplace, I found the biggest cheeseburger, the biggest drink and fry I could. I went down there and I screamed and yelled until he looked up at me, and I started eating it. And here's the photos.
Yes.
Here's the photos.
So you've been so closely affiliated with professional wrestling. Were you ever tempted to try to work with one of these feds as an actual manager or booker or anything along those lines?
As a kid, obviously, I dreamed of doing it. As a responsible adult with a wife and 2 kids, absolutely not. I want nothing to do. I stay on this side of the barrier wall. You guys are over there. I've been in one wrestling ring in my entire life, and that was about 2 months ago when I went and helped to shoot a documentary for OVW. And that's the only time I've ever even set foot in a ring. I have no interest in working with a promotion or certainly not working as an on-air personality or even as an announcer.
The current OVW is Danny Davis. He's not involved whatsoever, not even as an advisor. Or
he's retired. It's Al Snow's doing some amazing things with them. It's a Gladiator Sports Network, and they're it looks to me like he's building the territory. I mean, he's got his students and he's got the school, which is now actually a trade school registered with the state of Kentucky. You can get, fill out a FAFSA and get financial aid to go to OVW now and learn the business of professional wrestling. I mean, he's bringing in the veterans to work alongside these kids and to give some name value to the program. And I can't say enough good things about what Al's doing over there. I mean, it's really awesome.
In Lima, Ohio, he had that for quite a long time.
I think, well, it's the Al Snow Wrestling Academy at Ohio Valley Wrestling. So I think I think he's just kind of moved the operations there. I think he's got a school in the UK as well. I'm not 100% sure, but and they are affiliated with Impact again too, and they've done a couple of cross promotional shows with Impact.
Provided a few wrestlers for Impact, or when it was still TNA, I think.
Yep. Yeah, they had when they were TNA, they had obviously Rob Terry and Rockstar Spud and a couple of those guys were. I remember seeing them over there, Jesse Goddards and all that. But they've got that connection back, and they've done a couple of shows where they're OVE is what they're known. I knew them as OI4K in the Indies, but they would invade and crash the TV tapings and everything, and build up to. They did a couple of Impact specials on the Impact Network.
Now, if you could do a book with anyone, and you could pick anyone from any time frame, living or dead, who would you do a biography on?
I said my dream project would be Kevin Von Erich. I'd love to work with Kevin Von Erich. I think I think he's been approached a number of times, and he's probably told his family story to death. But Kevin was a favorite of mine. Of all the Von Erich boys, I thought it was cool that he wrestled barefoot. But I would certainly enjoy working with him. There's a number of them out there. I think Boogeyman would be a lot of fun to work with. I've got a real fun idea. If he's watching this, I've got a real fun idea for how we could tell his story. There's a couple of.
Is he watching us? Hi, Boogeyman. I
don't know.
If you are.
There's a couple of historical ones I love. Tor Johnson's one I've thought about going back and doing as well, not just because of the wrestling, but I've been an Ed Wood, Plan 9, Outer Space fan since I was little. And I think that would be
just as Ed Wood stories alone would be worth.
Yep. I'm working with. I'm in contact with two of the nieces of Mars Bennett, who's another. She wrestled from 50 to 57 and passed away in a car accident. But I'm in contact with them and hoping to start work on that as I'm finishing up Princess Victoria. And one of these days I'm going to get around to doing Wee Willie Davis, who was wrestler and a movie star. Famous game show host, inventor, and promoter, and a number of different things. And actually got to do a cool interview with him. The last job he had was in Louisville working. He was the gymnasium supervisor at the Jefferson County Jail. And this guy told me, I was like, if you worked at that jail, it was just a rough place. And at least once or twice during your career, you got your jaw broken. Everybody except Willie.
Yeah.
The prisoner, he was 6'6", he was 70 years old, but they were still not going to mess with this guy. There was just something about him. And Willie never talked about anything he didn't talk about his wrestling, didn't talk about his movie career. And then the guy says, I'm watching TV late one night with my wife, and this movie comes on. I'm like, that looks like William. That looks like the guy I work with. And that's when he found out who he was.
He was huge in the California scene. We should get you back with Tom Burke and maybe just do a show on Jack Pfeffer. Talk about.
I'd love to talk with Tom anytime.
Or if you can rope Al Snow, I'd love to interview him.
I'm trying to rope Al just to talk about Candido right now. So, but yeah.
I hope you use my photos on Chris. We did that because I came across a whole ton more. I think I sent you the XPW one. Speaking of Tracy,
I don't know if you did, but go ahead and send those over if you got them. Yeah, we're in photo collection mode right now. So, still trying to get a few more interviews, cram a few more in, and hopefully over the course of the next month, kind of get a book put together that I can start sending the proofreaders, and we're working on getting the cover selected so we can get or photo selected for the cover so we can get that designed. But Chris Candido's biography, we're hoping to have that out in January, and then shooting for. Don't know if we'll make it or not, but we're certainly going to try to have Princess Victoria's ready for Cauliflower Alley, if there is a Cauliflower Alley this year. So
or maybe a virtual one. By the way, I wanted Evan to have a moment because we're running towards the end of the program, but I wanted Evan to share some of his thoughts on a wrestling manager who died this week and promoter.
My friend Mike Frigerio, we knew him as Lucha Mike, and on Facebook he was Mike Mindless. He was a musician, He was a journalist. He was a photographer. He was a early exponent of lucha libre before it was cool. You know, he just really put the word out on lucha, and you know, he was a vendor. He was a real Renaissance man, and he passed, unfortunately, on my birthday. So we'll always be connected. A couple of days ago, also the day before Tracy. So Mike Frigerio, Lucha Mike, as most of us knew him, R.I.P. And they were both 58 years old. Correct, John? Yeah.
58,
So
yep.
by today's standards, that's young. So what can you say? Over the years, we've lost a lot of friends, allies, and Lucha Mike is, as we say in wrestling, you could do business on a handshake. You know, he'd sell like lucha masks and all kinds of merchandise, and just an honest guy. And he went all over the country, all over the world, you know, pursuing his passions. And he wasn't cut out to be a 9-to-5er. He lived the life he, you know, was meant to live. So Lucha Mike, R.I.P. We lost another good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, very sad. He was very well thought of in the independent wrestling community, and as you said, a lot of people who are lucha fans owe quite a bit to him.
Yeah, he wrote for Super Luchas. He was a journalist like Mike, just kind of like the other side. You know, Lucha, Mexico. Yeah.
So sorry to have to bring the program on a down note. You know, it's
like, just because two guys died in 2 days.
Yeah.
Right around your birthday too, which again is
yeah.
So, Mike, tell us about that. We'll end on a more upbeat note.
My wife gets this. It's a publication for women who do craft work and other stuff. It's called Where Women Create Work. They do 3 different magazines every quarter. This is Linda and Stephanie on the cover. Can you believe this?
Yeah, they both make my skin crawl.
I found it ironic 4 years ago when he, our commander-in-chief, appointed a woman who, along with her husband, put multiple small businesses out of business forever, and took her and made her the head of the administration's small business department.
They have no sense of irony, John.
Yeah, absolutely.
No pensions, no 401ks, no health benefits. This is the person you want in charge of small businesses. Oh my God!
While I have this
for the wrestlers, anyway. For the wrestlers.
What was the name?
I have a second. I do want to give a shout out to Lucha F Mask folks for sending me this great Super Destroyer 2000 mask. Said I'd mention them this week on the program. Nice. And they're on Etsy. You can find them on Facebook. They sent me this great mask, and I love wearing it now. It's a tribute to my friend Mark Smith, who was Super Destroyer 2000 and unfortunately died. In November, it'll be 9 years since he died. This program's really bringing up a lot of sad moments. But I guess, you know, we're on the precipice of the Eve of the Dead. Tomorrow's Halloween. So, you know, if you're not going to think of these fallen comrades now, when are you going to think about them? So,
John, I have a book coming out, and it's basically a short story collection. It's similar in structure to House on Mango Street, which we were talking about earlier, which is a beautiful book.
Yep.
Sandra Cisneros.
I'm excited to dive into it myself.
Sandra Cisneros grew up in a poor Hispanic neighborhood in the 1960s, and it's a short story collection about the neighbors, the family. And I basically was motivated by that whole structure, and my book is about some of not only the wrestlers, but actors and musicians and all the incredible people I've met over the years, and many are gone. So it's not going to be a traditional wrestling book by any means, because only part of it is wrestling, but it's a big part of it. And you know, and it's real from the heart. from the heart. Like when John was talking before about Tracy Smothers, you know, I'm interested in Tracy the mentor, Tracy the father figure, Tracy the big brother figure. And to me, that's more interesting than he won this title on June 8th, 1982. You know, that's just me. But, you know, so people look for different things in books. And
we've talked about that before. We're both storytellers, and it's more not, you know, there's guys that love the record books, and there's guys that put out phenomenal record books that are great resources too. But you know, like you, I love the story. That's why I did the Grappling by Gaslight book, which was kind of based on the stories of the 1880s. And it's real hard to find anything out about, you know, somebody like Ida Alb, the circus wrestler who used to do these intergender matches.
That's
back
human interest.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but you know, just to bring out and just to try to capture what it was like in that era, and present a moment in time is just it was a real fun project to do.
It was
I have. What's that, Mike?
Those were the pre-at shows, or was that the at period, the
It was
early part of the?
It was the at period. Yeah, she did this gimmick in Louisville. She did it in St. Louis. There's a couple other places I've found she's done it, but basically she would go to the local newspaper and put up $250 as an open challenge, you know, because as people are accusing us of hippodroming, which was the term they used back then for fake wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, I want to show this is we're on the up and up, and it was an open challenge. Anybody up to 150 pounds, and there would always be a local volunteer. You can read between the lines of the Courier Journal, and this was totally set up. This was totally 100% of work. But it was so well done, you know, and she wrestled this guy at the Opera House, best 3 out of 5 falls. It goes all the way to 5 falls. But just as a thing, just to, you know, drive up interest in the circus, drive up interest in the wrestling shows. And unfortunately, she passed away. The saddest thing is I found her obituary, you know, Ida Alb, the circus, she passed away of an opium overdose. And the saddest part about it is, like, nobody knew what her real name was. Nobody knew where she was actually from or anything. It was kind of the last word I found on her. And I've been in touch with the national, I can't remember the name of the Circus Museum up in, I think it's Baraboo, Wisconsin, and they have no record whatsoever. They've got a lot of stuff from Adam Forepaugh Circus, which is who she worked for, but no record of her whatsoever.
John, I gotta say you've been just a fantastic guest tonight, but we're right about at the end of the hour. So I'd like for you to be able to tell the viewers how they could be in touch, and how if you've got things to promote, how they can check out your books and your sites.
Sure. EatSleepWrestle.com is my wrestling website. JohnCosper.com is my author website, where I've got some of my fiction and film stuff that's non-wrestling related. You can find me on Instagram. I think it's John Cosper Author. Twitter, I'm at John Cosper. I've got a John Cosper page and an Eat Sleep Wrestle page, both on Facebook. So, you know, follow me on social media. Check out the website. Most of my books are available. Tracy's is actually, I think, sold out at this point, but I do have more coming in. What we did before the pandemic really kicked off was I had him sign a bunch of labels to put in the books. That way we didn't have to do any traveling. He was 2 hours away from me. So there will still be some more autographed editions of Tracy's book available shortly, as soon as I get a restock it.
And is
Wonderful.
the GoFundMe still open?
The GoFundMe is still open. Yeah, Lincoln Mosley and Amazing Maria put together a GoFundMe. That's the one to contribute to. It is going to his family. I know there's going to be a number of tribute shows as well, unless we all get shut down again, you know, by health departments. But yeah, there's a GoFundMe set up if you want to contribute to. There's a lot of medical bills. He did have some insurance, but there's still medical bills and the funeral expenses as well.
And there's also a GoFundMe for Mike Frigerio, Frigerio. He had a stroke months ago, so he had ridiculous medical bills. So if anybody could help him out also, Mike Frigerio, a.k.a. Lucha Mike. So on that happy note,
You've been a great guest. We'd love to have you in the future. So when you have another big project coming up, hopefully not someone dying again, but you know, somebody that you're working with, you've got another book.
There's nobody more interesting to me than Jack Pfeffer. So
we'd love to have you on the show again. And you've been really a tremendous guest. You've really brought some amazing stories to us tonight.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to come back anytime just to talk. So just let me know.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike,
really
for bringing John on.
Yeah.
Evan, guys, great wrestle. Great to meet you, and good to talk to you guys.
Great. And we'll see everybody next week. So long, everybody. Good night.
Night.